Hello, my name is Daniel, and this is the Engineering Success Podcast, episode 23. I'm recording this on May 30th, 2022. Last episode was recorded on May 21st, 2022, so, maybe this is a start of something new. We'll see. I hope you guys are doing alright. It's internship season. What is internship season, you may be wondering? Well, it's the lovely time of the summer where college students have just gotten out within the last couple of weeks, and they have either started or are getting ready to start their college internships at various engineering firms and companies and shops around the country. So we have a bunch of questions related to internships lined up, coincidentally. So we'll get into those in the second half of the podcast, but first off, let's get some of our business taken care of. First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to our top tier supporters of the podcast. Our top tier supporters of the podcast support the podcast by donating $10 a month, and as a reward, they get a shout out at the beginning of every single episode. And currently, our top tier subscriber is John Ott. You can join John Ott in my thanks and gratitude if you also choose to support the podcast at $10 a month. If you want to support the podcast, but you don't want to support that much, $5 a month gets you a shout out at the first episode of each month. If you want any of your questions answered, make sure you write into engring.success@gmail.com, and I will make sure to answer them on the podcast. Additionally, give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, follow the podcast on your provider, and subscribe on YouTube. Comment on YouTube, comment your questions on YouTube, email them to me any way you want. Any way you want to interact, that all helps me out. But we know what time it is. It's time for our first segment of every single episode of the Engineering Success Podcast, this week in LinkedIn Lunatics. This week's first LinkedIn Lunatic is a very recurring person in many people's perceptions of LinkedIn Lunatics. His name is Jonathan Tesser. I'm not the most familiar with Jonathan's work, but I do know that on the r LinkedIn Lunatics subreddit, he's probably the most popular guy around. So let me go ahead and show you guys this one. So here we go. This one is, I'm on LinkedIn because it makes me feel powerful. People here respect me and listen to what I have to say. I can talk to anyone I want, and they'll get back to me since I have clout. I can whine about stupid crap that most people would ignore in other realms of my life, and you know what? I'm cool with this. Because we all need something in our life that makes us feel powerful. It's a natural human thing to want. So found your power thing. Ain't no shame in wanting to feel wanted, heard, seen, and appreciated. Hashtag testimony. Hashtag emotional intelligence. Hashtag mental health. Hashtag power. Now this one isn't his worst one. But he's so powerful they call him the Godfather of LinkedIn. I just want to look this guy up real quick. So, Jonathan Tesser, LinkedIn. So, this is him. And you might be hearing some noise in the background. That's because the lovely cat, Clementine, who is currently visiting our house, just took a dump in the room that I am recording the podcast in. Shout out. Insights at... Oh my gosh, that smells so bad. Insights at Kashmir Agency, career whisperer for the young professionals, master teacher at master school, and earning a PhD in life. Yeah, he's just a big time LinkedIn guy. That's for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. Not the biggest fan of this level of arrogance on LinkedIn. Come on, man. I mean, I get that this is his brand and whatever, but it's just... I mean, he doesn't need to be employed by somebody, I assume, because this is just what he does for a living, so I guess good for him. But if I was looking at this, I'd be like, come on, this is not what LinkedIn is. Like, whining about stupid crap. No, man. I whine about stupid crap on my podcast. I don't whine about it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a networking site, and this mentality that you can talk to anyone you want, no. I think that if Jonathan Tesser hit me up, I'd probably say yes, but I'm not just anyone. I'm just some guy with a podcast that's trying to get clicks. So I get, find your power thing. I guess anybody can find their power thing. But this whole, people who respect me and listen to what I have to say, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I guess if people are generally respectful, then they respect you. But I'm not, I mean, maybe I just don't know enough about this man and how wonderful and amazing and powerful he is. But I'm not looking at him and going like, oh man, I need to respect this guy. He's like so extra respectable because he's famous on LinkedIn and has a bunch of followers and influencers influencing on LinkedIn. So, I don't know. That's just not the ideal thing for me. All right, next one. Kid asks his mom how to seem less desperate for attention. Mom posted on LinkedIn for attention and compares son to cheese is the caption of this one. Thank you, the creepy shark. So this lady, Charlie, says, last night my son asked me how he can stop being so desperate for everyone to like him. He knows it's holding him back socially because it leads to massive overthinking, and then he doesn't work on building relationships. I said, imagine you provide a wonderful cheese board to 100 people at the end of the meal. 50 of them may adore the cheese and love it. Some may be on a diet, or are dairy intolerant, or vegan, or have horrible memories of a cheese-based instant. I don't know what. I was improvising. You've given them all exactly the same food, but they have very different opinions of it. What I'm saying is, you can be exactly who you are to 100 people, and what they think of you will depend as much on their own experiences and beliefs as it does on you. You can't please everyone, and you shouldn't try. You can be the best, kindest, and most considerate version of yourself, and that is all you can do. The rest is up to them, the ones who don't get you, who won't stick around, and the ones that love you will. Just be yourself. I think my pep talks used to go in one ear and out the other ear, but this morning he thanked me and said he would remember that he's a cheese board and that some people will love him and others won't, but that's okay. Food-based inspiration is my favorite kind. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with these types of messaging. Like, for example, what she said to her kid was great, but like that's good advice. You just be yourself. I think that's important. Should it be on LinkedIn? Maybe. I mean, I don't have any problem with it being on LinkedIn, though it's obviously clickbait. The problem I have is that these people, again, they're exploiting their kid and embarrassing their kid on a public forum for engagement, and I just think that that's kind of sad. Like why do you feel the need to do that? I just don't understand why somebody can be so. I mean, I believe that people act in their own self-interest. So to that extent, I get it. This woman is acting in her self-interest. She's a rational person in that sense, but that's a stupid metaphor. I'm not going to even go in that direction. The point is stop embarrassing your kids publicly for your own personal gain. That's just frustrating to me, and I really feel sad for this kid. And honestly, though, I bet that this kid doesn't even exist. And here's the thing about LinkedIn. So you go on LinkedIn.com, and you go search, last night my son asked me to. And you go to post. Last night my son asked me how he can stop being so desperate. Okay, so this one hasn't been copied, so that's good. But the other thing is, like, sometimes these aren't even real. So people will take this exact same thing and repost it, and I'm wrong. It hasn't been reposted, at least prominently enough that I can see it, but yeah, it's just... I don't like it. Alright. Well, anyways... this room smells absolutely horrid. So I'm going to cut to an ad break.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about a new podcast called Tequila Time. The Tequila Time podcast is a weekly podcast of fusion of tech, entertainment, business, travel, and more. and of tequila, of course. Dive right in as your hosts, Kellen and Marius, explore relevant topics to the business world and beyond. Join them in their travels around the world and learn about how new technology and the newest Silicon Valley trends. Hear their interviews with special guests possessing unparalleled knowledge within their disciplines. You can find them on anchor.fm/tequila time and on Instagram as the Tequila Time Podcast.
I'll come right back with the second half of the podcast. And we're back. Man. Whew, okay, it still smells a little bit in here, but it's not the worst. So I had to take the litter box out because just taking out the turd was not enough to mitigate the smell. So we're going to keep on going. All right. Let's get into the main section. Oh, okay. Cat and dog are meeting each other underneath the door. We'll see how this goes. I might have to pull away in a minute. All right, let's go into the main part of the podcast. So the theme of the podcast is internships. So the majority of our questions, and the first maybe 5 or so questions, are internships. So before we get into the questions, I saw this post and on Reddit, and it was on RCS career questions, so computer science career questions, and I thought that it was some good advice. So I figured I would share it. It is titled Tips for a Successful Internship from a Big Tech Intern Manager. Having mentored 3 interns who successfully got their return offers, I've seen many examples of successful interns. Here are some tips for your internship. And I'll just go ahead and have it up on the screen so that way you can see who it's from. Do what is expected of you. Number 1. Firstly, in order to do what is expected of you, you gotta know what is expected of you. If you're a software engineering intern, most of the time you will just need to finish your project by writing high-quality code while not being a jerk. To write high-quality code, look at how code is written in the code base and follow the conventions. Directory structure, naming, use existing abstractions, aka see how things are already being done. Methodologies, procedures, numerology, etc. to other engineering disciplines. And follow that. Break your code into small PRs so that it's easy to review. Nobody likes reviewing PRs, which are thousands of lines long. Write tests. So yeah, test your own stuff too. Demonstrate independence. Your intern, manager, mentor, host is also a busy employee. Yes, they are, and they have their own work to do. If you run into issues, try to unblock yourself first before asking someone. Look up internal documentation, look at existing parts of the code, and see if you can follow similar approaches. Again, seeing how things are already done and mirroring. If you're still stuck, then ask. Post in support groups, chats, and share your high-level goal, the approaches you've tried, and why they didn't work. This helps people to help you. It's okay to ask more questions at the start as you're new, but it should get less frequent over time. So yes, if you're going to go to somebody with a question, you have to at least try it first and have to understand, have to have also maybe spent some time trying to understand why you are struggling and where exactly you're struggling. A generic, help me do this, is terrible. That's not the way to ask questions. Number 3, take initiative and ownership of your project. Rather than waiting for tasks to be handed to you, look at the roadmap or create one if it doesn't exist, and keep working on the next item. Break down the project and create tasks for yourself, closing them when completed. Be your own project manager and product manager. Keep a log of the work you've done. This will be super useful if you have to write a self-evaluation at the end of your internship. Also, it's very useful if you're trying to build your resume. It's good to have a good description and catalog of the things that you've done, because you might think you'll be able to remember them in the moment, but you won't. Also, I use Trello for my task management at work. Whatever task management software or planner or whatever you use in school, take that to the max and really be dedicated with that with your work. It's also really helpful to know what you've accomplished whenever somebody asks you what you've been up to, because somebody might ask you what you've been working on. 4, communicate well. You should be the best advocate of your work. In large companies, peer feedback is taken into account for the internship evaluation. Tell your team what you're doing, make occasional updates about your work, and give others visibility into your work and demo your work during sprint meetings. Again, just be able to tell people what you're doing and be able to communicate what you're doing. having a good notes of what you're up to, and then sometimes whenever I go into these kind of status check or sprint meetings, I have what I'm going to talk about and what I've been working on already laid out and organized, so that way when I'm talking, I'm not having to go switching between the different tasks that I'm working on. I have a bullet point list of the tasks that I'm working on, and I have them organized based on what I'm trying to communicate. Like, here's the things that I'm doing, here's the things that I've done, and here's the things I need help with, or whatever organization. And that's just an example. 5, take feedback seriously. Your mentor should already be providing you feedback constantly, otherwise you can always ask. Ask how you can improve and what you can do better. Since you'll be spending lots of time writing code, make sure you pay attention to the code review comments you receive and don't make the same mistake twice. Maybe even keep a notebook of the feedback that you've received. In my email folder at work, I have one folder for all the kudos and the praise that I've received. I have another folder for all the feedback that I've received. And I keep notes in my planner of times when I've received feedback, and might be something to consider. 6, over-deliver on your project. If you're delivering your milestones ahead of time, instead of chilling and sticking to the schedule, finish your project ahead of time. This gives you the opportunity to pursue other things, like maybe meeting with people that have impacts on your career. You can work on stretch goals of your project, think of new ways to improve your project, and execute on them. Market your project and get people to use it. Iterate on user feedback. Yeah, don't just, maybe if you can, put yourself in a position where you can not just deliver, but you can deliver already having had feedback whenever you are delivering. Do what is not expected of you. Of course, this doesn't mean negative things, but do things which people don't expect interns to be doing. The rockstar interns I've seen, they completed their project in half allocated time, had the time to help their fellow interns in their work, sometimes even helping full-timers in their work, were added to the team's on-call, helped to review the team's code, and helped to answer questions from external partners about the team's work. Not all of these will be applicable to your situation, especially if you're not a software engineer, but you get the idea. They were functioning and having impact as if they were a full-time team member. Again, you shouldn't expect to be able to do this, but something to think about trying to do. And lastly, assess the company. As much as an internship is a prolonged interview if you're fit for the company, it's also a chance for you to interview the company. Is it a fit for you? Do you enjoy the team and company's working style? Do they overwork their employees and treat their employees with respect? Sometimes interns can be too busy with their project to pay attention to these things, but ultimately these are important factors to take into consideration when deciding whether to sign the return offer. Yeah, an internship is not only an evaluation of you, but also your evaluation of the company. What about their culture do you like? What about their culture do you not like? And what can you take away from that and learn questions about asking whenever you're interviewing with other companies potentially after you're looking for a full-time offer? So yeah, I thought that was just some pretty good advice. I have no shame in sharing it. Again, the user was user Yang Shunz, YANGSHUNZ. And this was on our CS career questions, and I think it's just really good advice to follow. And everybody that's having an internship, I know that it's going to be good. It's going to be well, it might not be good, but it'll be good for you. It'll be good for you. That's for sure. All right. Next one. First internship starts on Tuesday. Any advice? Got my first mechanical manufacturing engineering internship that starts on Tuesday. I'm really afraid I'm not going to perform based on my past experiences. I'm going to be working for a small, medium company that was recently acquired by a larger company. This summer will be the first time they hire interns, so I wasn't really explained much in depth about what I'll be doing on the job. I have good grades at school, 3.8 GPA, but I've always lacked in the real-life situation / thinking like an actual engineer because of my ADHD / anxiety. Every time I'm part of a project for a class or club, I'm always the worst member because I suck at coming up with ideas or thinking fast. I'm only good at studying for exams. Any advice for how to succeed in this internship? I'm afraid the issues that I mentioned above are going to carry over to my internship. The engineering managers are probably expecting a lot out of me because of my GPA and the fact that I kind of oversold myself when discussing my part in projects and clubs during my interviews. I know that I'm probably overthinking this, yes you are, but part of me is afraid that I'm going to get fired mid-internship because I'm incompetent. You won't, unless you fall asleep at your desk. TLDR, I suck as an engineer and I start my first internship on Tuesday. How do I succeed? Alright, so I kind of sped through reading that, but let's talk about it. So, first thing that they say, I wasn't really explained much in depth about what I'll be doing on the job. So, yeah, depending on if they worked to try to structure their internship program or not, you might spend a lot of time shadowing other people. And if you're in a position where you're sitting at your desk and you're doing nothing, you are doing it wrong, find your way into shadowing somebody else into a meeting, into a manufacturing line thing, out in the line or anywhere you can. Try to spend as minimal time as possible doing nothing. You say that every single time you're part of a project for a class or club, you're always the worst member because you suck at coming up with ideas or thinking fast, and that you're only good at studying for exams. Okay, change your frame of mind here. Be a little bit more positive than that. You have a great GPA, you mentioned, so that says that you have some great characteristics. It says that you are probably pretty organized and pretty disciplined in the fact that you probably study pretty well to keep your GPA that high, and you have good study habits. So translate those good habits into good habits as an employee. For example, if you're organized and you're disciplined, make sure that you're arriving on time every single day, and you're leaving, and you're working and keeping yourself busy and managing your time effectively while you're there, so you're not in a position where you're sitting around and doing nothing. That's what would frustrate somebody about an intern if they're just sitting around doing nothing. You say that you suck at coming up with ideas or thinking fast. Well, nobody expects the intern to solve their problems. If a company is hiring interns and expecting the interns to make a massive difference and improvement to the company and the way that they function, that's not a kind of company you'd want to work for. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to get something out of the interns, but they shouldn't be expecting you to be charting the direction of the company as an intern. So you're not really going to have to be the ideas person. When thinking fast, well, you'll be surprised at how slow things move in industry. But be positive. You say, any advice how to succeed? You say the engineering managers are probably expecting a lot out of you because of your GPA and because you oversold yourself? Probably not. They're probably not expecting a lot out of you. They shouldn't. They should expect you to show up with a positive energy and wanting to learn and show up on time and not be twiddling all your time on your phone at your desk. That's the first steps to having a good internship. You say you're probably overthinking this, but part of you is thinking you're afraid that you're going to get fired mid-internship. That's the only thing that I've heard of that's gotten somebody fired from an internship is because they fell asleep at their desk consistently. So, and they didn't even get fired from the internship. They got kept through the entire internship, and then they just didn't get a return offer. So, just show up on time, be positive, ask good questions, don't ask the same questions over and over again. Follow people around, make sure that you're not just sitting around doing nothing. Put yourself in a position to try new things and to make yourself as helpful as you possibly can. And know that you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to get everything right. So keep that positive energy and give it your best, and you'll be surprised at how much of a well-liked person you can be at the internship. So that's how you succeed at an internship. I wish you the best of luck. Next one was posted on r/engineering students. Is titled, Internships that Provide Housing? Is this a common thing? Or internships that provide a stipend or help with living accommodations and things? I'm applying to places, but I'm currently limited by my location and not having a reliable car. But I'm working on that. Sorry. Is it common that companies provide this? If so, where have people found these types of opportunities? I'm a mechanical engineering student, if it makes a difference, interested in sustainability and that kind of thing. So, I know that whenever my company had their internship, they did provide a stipend for housing. And I think that most companies have structured internship programs. And what does that mean? That means that they usually have a good number of interns. They likely have somebody that is their internship program coordinator. So it's not just a recruiter, but they have people that are actually coordinating an internship program. Then those companies generally provide housing for their interns. And yeah, in the form of a stipend. Now, it might not cover everything that you need for housing. You might have to have roommates. You might not be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment on that stipend or a luxury apartment. But yeah, I wouldn't. What I'd do is I would just keep on applying to as many internships as you possibly can. And whenever you get to the interview section, you mentioned that they're obviously going to ask where you're from. They're going to know where you're from. So when you get to the point where you're talking about what compensation and the program looks like, you can ask as one of your questions, hey, what do y'all do about where do all the interns live, and what does the company do about housing? And saying, hey, where do all the interns live is not saying, hey, will you house me? But saying, where do all the interns generally live? Like, what's the part in town that everybody generally lives in? That kind of can get the ball rolling on that housing conversation, and you can kind of slip it in there, saying, hey, oh, so, the company is here. Where do most of the interns live? Really? Oh, is it a place that you guys picked out and you recommend, or do y'all recommend a place, or? Oh, okay. How much does it usually? Do you know how much it costs to live there? I mean, are most interns able to afford that based on their internship salary, or how does that usually work? Oh, you have a housing stipend. I mean, yeah, just so I would start applying to places that have formalized, structured internship programs, and most of those companies, if you live outside of a certain radius, then they'll provide housing. And I mean, I lived in Fort Worth, but I was going to college in San Antonio, so I said that I didn't need a stipend whenever I probably would have benefited from one. But I was just so desperate to get my foot in the door as an intern, so I just wanted to remove as many barriers and as much friction as possible whenever I was applying for my internship. So, but yeah, just bring it up casually. And, companies that have formal internship programs, they're the ones that look at it as more of an investment than maybe a trying to extract work out of you thing. So likely they'll be the ones that are more willing to make that investment and also providing you with housing. Next one, interview advice. Tomorrow morning I have an interview for an internship position at my dream company. What advice do you have for me? All right, so here was my approach to internship interviews. So this is likely your first interview. So the majority of the questions are going to be about you and who you are. They're trying to see if you're a culture fit. That's usually what the first interview is. So you're going to get questions about things like, hey, tell me about a time you worked in a group. Tell me about a time where you worked in a group where people maybe didn't agree with one another or there was conflict. Tell me about a time where, all the tell me about a time questions. Basically trying to see if you're going to be a locker room cancer, as us sport fans would say. Like, are you going to bring bad vibes into the office? And if you don't bring bad vibes into the office and the interviewer just generally finds you a pleasant person to talk to, which might sound crazy, but that's kind of the criteria, then you might get a follow-up interview with maybe the hiring manager, or if you interviewed with the internship program manager the first time, then you might be interviewing with a career person in their employment group, or vice versa. If you interviewed with a recruiter the first time, then maybe you'll interview with the actual internship program coordinator the second time. So yeah, be prepared for a behavioral-based interview, and you can probably even ask the person that's interviewing you in advance, like, hey, just so I make sure that I'm prepared, what's the subject matter of the interview? Is it, and then they can say, oh, it's behavioral, and maybe they won't even say that. Maybe they won't. Maybe don't ask for that. But I don't know. Wouldn't be the worst thing to ask. Hey, what kind of topics are generally covered in the first interview? Maybe some recruiters out here will come on and comment and say that that's not the right thing to say. But I don't personally see why there would be any issue with saying that. So. Yeah, but what's your weakness? I just think that's such a basic question, but people probably still ask that. What's one of your weaknesses, and what do you do? But remember, you end with a positive spin. This is how I'm working on it, or whatever. But yeah, so just be prepared for behavioral-based interview questions, and also come prepared. And you said it's your dream company, so I'm pretty sure that you're not going to have this issue, but you should go into your internship interviews having already applied for the position, which you're getting interviewed, so I guess it's more career very applicable, but you want to have a general understanding of what the company does and a basic understanding of what that role does. So, for example, if you're going to become a production engineering intern, then you'd go on Google and say, what does a production engineer do? So that way, whenever you're asking questions, you're not saying, hey, so what is a production engineer? You say, hey, so I'm not exactly sure what a production engineer does, but I looked into it and I think that production engineers do this. Is that what production engineers do at your company? And is that what I would be doing as an intern? And what that does is it does two things. First of all, they don't have to spend a significant portion of the interview explaining to you what the internship is and what the company and what the role does. Secondly, it shows you show initiative. Again, we talked about this earlier in the podcast, but you don't want to be the person asking level 1 questions or questions that you didn't have a chance to research yourself. So you're probably going to want to know, they're going to know that you want to know what a production engineer does for the company. So at least have done the bare minimum in figuring out what generally production engineers do. Or for example, say it's Lockheed Martin. Maybe you should go into the interview knowing that for the most part, Lockheed Martin, one of their biggest bread and butters is they make planes. And those planes are called like the F-16, the F-18, the F-22, the F-33. F-35. I'm sorry. Dad, forgive me. But yeah, so, the stuff that anybody should generically know if they had the most basic level understanding of what the company was, you should go up into that interview knowing that. And you said it's your dream company, so I'm not as worried about that for you. But yeah, that is what I'd say I would work on as an internship. Be prepared for behavioral-based questions. Do some research so that you can ask some level 2 questions. Or, I don't know what a level 1 and a level 2 question is, but yeah, don't ask what is a production engineer. Ask, hey, I research production engineers. This is what I think they do. Is this what they do? Keep the conversation as much on you being a fit for the role, not them trying to explain what the role is. So whenever they explain what a production engineer does, then respond by saying, hey, oh, I like that. I think I'd be a good fit for that because of this, and this. And then lastly, I'll close out with this. One piece of advice that everybody keeps on pointing to is called the STAR interview method. And the STAR interview method is as I'm going to show on the screen here. So this is the STAR. It's loading. But the STAR method is a method for responding to interview questions. And if it doesn't open in the next 2 minutes and 2 seconds, I'm going to open up another article. So this is an article from the Muse. And I'm going to skip. Oh, I don't want to sign up. Skip down. So STAR stands for situation. Set the scene and give the necessary details of your example. T, task. Describe what your responsibility was in that situation. A, action. Explain exactly what steps you took to address it. R, share what outcomes your actions achieved. For example, Daniel, tell us about a time that you dealt with stinky cat poo while doing a podcast. How did you react? Situation. Well, I was sitting in my guest room and I was recording an episode of the Engineering Success Podcast, which is my podcast where I talk about career advice. And this lovely cat named Clementine that we're helping cat sit for in this room took a dump. And obviously I had the responsibility of continuing to record my podcast, but also I really wanted to have a good environment to record my podcast in, and that environment needed to be free of cat poo. Action. So the steps I took was I found a natural breaking point in the episode of the podcast, an ad break after the first segment of my podcast. I stopped recording and I went out and cleaned out the litter box and took the cat poo outside and threw it away outside. R, result. The outcome is that I was able to continue recording my podcast without any issues. And, well, I got interrupted later, but Other than that, I didn't have to deal with the stinky cat poo smell anymore. So that's STAR. Situation, task. My responsibility was to record an episode of my podcast. Action, I took the step to take that poo out. Result, share what outcomes your actions achieved. And if you can formulate all your responses in that method, it gives you... that way you're not in a position where you're having to rove around and your response is kind of all over the place. STAR gives you the framework to respond. And that's how all of your responses to questions, and if you want to be an effective communicator, using STAR, or just, again, having planned and structured to how you speak is how you become a more effective communicator and how you do well in interviews. And it's why I record this podcast. You might not be able to see it because I'm still working on that skill, but I am using STAR, or I call it table topics. So I'm using my table topic skills, so my quick reaction skills, to practice coming up with structured responses to questions on the fly. That's why I record this podcast, and because I care about other people's careers. But working on that skill makes you an effective communicator. That's why I do this podcast, because I believe in it. All right, next question. How much work is reasonable to expect from interns? Next week, I am receiving 1 or 2 university-level engineering interns for the next 5 months. I, lacking experience with interns, I am unsure how much time they will likely require for project spin-up, education of our lab and technology, and delivering meaningful work. I fully expect half of our time together will be knowledge transfer with no meaningful work being produced. Meanwhile, I do expect some meaningful work to be delivered, not just to make my time investment have some gain, but for the interns to walk away with accomplishment. Please share opinions or experiences. So, before I go into my answer, I saw another really good answer, and I realized I didn't even copy the name of the person that gave it. So, let me find it, because it was so good, and I don't want this person to lose it. So here it is. Don't lose focus on how much they have to learn beyond the technical skills. Here are some of the challenges I've seen my placement students have to get to grips with. 1. How to do open-ended investigation that someone hasn't already planned out for you. Remember, all the problems that they've solved at this point, unless they've done projects, have been assignments that have been planned out for them by a textbook or by their professor. 2. How to cope and recover when you get to dead ends. 3. How to manage their time without obvious deadlines on timescales longer than a few weeks. What to do when no one has the answer. How to brief colleagues who haven't been sitting in the same lectures studying the same things as you, so how to effectively communicate what they're working on. How to work with people of different ages and backgrounds, especially when there is a feeling of seniority. How to manage generational and seniority differences in the meaning of phone call versus email versus instant message. How to secure time with busy people and use it usefully. Learning business tone of voice for emails and other communications. Writing and communicating for a specific targeted purpose rather than to hit a marking brief. How to deal with bureaucracy and IT delays. How to assess their own progress and get a feel for how they're doing. How to communicate with their supervisor about their progress and how they're doing. They're used to getting a grade back on an essay, not necessarily following up on it. How to maintain a sense of accomplishment without a series of grades and numbers to provide reassurance that they are progressing. How your company's procedures work for requesting information, writing things up, and a myriad of other processes. How their team is structured and how it interacts with other groups and functions. How to manage holidays, health appointments, and other responsibilities around the working day. Living outside the sheltered bubble of a student-focused environment. Adjusting to new physical and sensory situations such as temperature, clothing, and open-plan offices. As your supervisor, you have to think of these things because most of them the student won't even realize are things that need to be learned. Exactly. They are firmly in the unconscious incompetence stage, yes, and moving from that to conscious incompetence, then on further still, can be a scary time. And I just thought that that was a great piece of advice. So I say all that to say that you ask how much work is reasonable to expect from interns. I would expect a net zero level of production, unless you have very specific easy tasks like, productivity tasks, how to maybe note taking and taking action items and running the context of meetings. The work that you can expect from interns is, in my opinion, pretty minimal, unless, again, there's specifically designed tasks. I'd say that in my internships that I worked in, about half of my time, this was my structured internship, half of my time was spent shadowing other people and doing a little bit of work, and the other half of my time was spent working on my company's internship project, which is a project they have all the interns work on. There's going to be a few moments. I'd say that they'll be able to count the things that they can do on maybe two hands of the number of things that they provided really meaningful input to the team if it's just one summer. There's just going to be they're going to be, in my opinion, probably a lot slower than the average new hire. Think about somebody that you've worked with in the past, you hired out of college that had no internship experience. How long it took them to get spun up and figure out what it was like to work in a professional environment. That's how long it'll take these interns. It might even take them the entire summer to get to that point. So, I wouldn't expect them to do too much, but you're going to have to be really selective and give them some really simple tasks and then work your way up from there based on how they're handling those simple tasks. And that's how you can gauge how much work they'll be able to accomplish. But it wouldn't take too much. Some other good responses I want to read through on here. Expect them to take twice as long and usually done incorrectly after all they're learning and new to the industry and new to working probably. Focus on providing them opportunities to experience various parts of the work and building fundamentals. Teach them how to have fun at work and how to work with others. And again, a big part of internship experiences is how to work in that corporate or that machine shop or in that manufacturing facility or in that refinery culture. That's what the internship is really figuring out how to be a contributor in those cultures. Next one, baseline is to expect to break even, so they're in line with me. They may not produce anything more than what you could have produced if you spent your time on the work rather than training or answering questions. It's like more of an extended job interview in my experience. Again, your company's making an investment by hiring these interns. That said, a good intern will be able to produce something useful that will be a net gain overall. At least in my experience, programming and automation projects are a good way to get something useful out of interns in a way that benefits you while they learn about work and process of the job. Your mileage may vary, though. Another one is, again, have the interns maybe, whenever they're first starting out, take action items and during meetings, have them be the one that, kind of like a junior project manager, have them being the one to follow up with people on those action items and maybe shadow those people as they're working on those action items. And then, you can start getting them cued into helping assist with some of these action items as well. Internship project, one project, 40 hours a week, most of which will require training and guidance and hand-holding at every step. This one's really cool. If they use software to do their job, ask them to create a detailed how-to for running the software for their basic tasks. Then they'll have a guide for themselves to refer back to. Also, if you have a subject matter expert on your team that you've been reaching out to and you're like, hey, any kind of departmental initiatives that might not necessarily be directly related to the work product. Again, the interns want to be in the work product, but sometimes they just can't quite contribute. So understanding the procedures and the platforms and the softwares you use will help them and give them an opportunity to then eventually contribute to those things. So, for example, if you're working on design reviews and you don't have a procedure written for how design reviews go, maybe the intern can sit in on that and help draft the procedure. Or if you're onboarding a new software, like a new modeling software for a process simulation or some specialty software, have the intern shadow the SME that's working on that software and then capture what the most important aspects for a new person that might have to do work in that software or take work out of that software, or whatever it's used for. Have that intern shadowing that SME to fully understand what somebody new would need to understand. And if that person can explain it to the intern and the intern can understand the how-to that they're doing, then it's a really good how-to for your team. And, Again, these are just really good responses. I thought that it would be a shame if I left them out. I was reading through them and I just thought it was really nice, so I figured I would share them. Oh, all right. Yeah, I don't know where my energy is at today, but for some reason I feel like I'm mentally like speed running through this episode. I don't know why. But there's where we are. Next one. My summer internship sucks. Nice. I scored an internship for the summer and have been working for a month. The team I'm working with barely cares about the project. I was having one-on-one meetings every day at the start of the internship, then those became twice a week, and now barely once a week. It's making me really demotivated when these people barely give a S. Rhymes with poop. What really pushed me to posting about this was when I scheduled a meeting with one of the tech leads and he told me to join the voice channel at 2 p.m. I showed up on time and had to wait 45 minutes until he actually joined. I'm feeling so demotivated about this whole thing. The app's front end is an absolute mess. Probably the worst garbage code I've ever seen in my life. It was a nightmare to try and work through it. I was even asked to rewrite the front end from scratch, but I'm not even sure where to start and no one is even guiding me. I feel like this really sucks. I had an offer from Deloitte that I didn't go through with because I thought this company would be better, but to be honest, I regret it. It's such a shame that I was given all these false promises about learning new things. I should have taken the Deloitte offer. At least they were a massive company, and I probably wouldn't have to deal with half of this BS there. So, I'm sorry. Like, this sucks. And it's hard to feel motivated when people around you aren't motivated. I have a bit of advice for you, but let's cue in on the 45 minutes late to the call thing. I think that one of the things that you're going to learn during this internship is how to interact in a professional environment and when it's appropriate to follow up with people and when it's not. And one of the things you might learn is that, hey, if somebody hasn't joined the call and you're 5 minutes in, that's the point where you can text them, even or instant message them or Slack them or whatever to say, hey, is this meeting still on or not? So don't be discouraged that the technical parts of your internship are not exactly what you expected them to be. You're also in an internship to learn how to work in a professional culture, and even if you don't like this culture, you can observe this culture and participate around this culture and be a positive person within the culture, and that is a skill that you will be able to carry with you as you move on to the next phase of your career. As for the content, you said the front end's a mess and is a nightmare to work through. You're asked to rewrite the front end from scratch. It's a shame that you were given all these false promises about learning new things. They shouldn't expect... It seems like it's pretty obvious that they don't really expect you to produce too much for them as an intern. So what I would do is, well, first of all, you're getting paid. Second of all, you're getting to learn about this new culture. So try to pursue things that you're interested in while you're there. For example, if a particular software or plugin or, I don't know, a particular type of coding, I'm not as proficient in discussing things related to computer science and code, sorry. But if a certain type of code language or tech stack or whatever, again, I'm not proficient, is something that you're really interested in developing yourself in, then maybe, reach out to other people in meetings and mention, hey, I'd be interested in doing this. I'd be interested in seeing how I could apply this solution to whatever we're working on. Or so basically, you're kind of you can put yourself in a position where you're still contributing to the team, even though they don't seem very interested in engaging you. They might be overworked on other things and kind of pressed to be able to interact with you. But, take the tasks that are related to the job and see how you can modify them or approach them in a way that's also beneficial for you. Look at as many different things that you can do within the context of your role to build that resume. Resume building activities. So, for example, if you really, really, really want to learn about AWS, you because you want to have that juicy cloud experience on your resume, and then find a way to work AWS into your role and what you're doing. And if there's not a direct application, or if they're not teaching you, then you can go spend some time teaching yourself and seeing if it relates, and take notes and report back on it. So if somebody asks you, you can say, "Hey, I looked into this. It's not a good solution for this," or whatnot. But yeah, I wouldn't obsess too much about the internship cycling. It's just one summer, so make what you can out of it. Do as much as you can, and use all the latest technology that you can, so you can just fill up your resume with all those buzzwords on that technology. The phrase I was looking for was resume-driven development, and somebody said, resume-driven development? That's all an internship ever is, really. Yeah. So, yeah. I think just think about as many things you can do to build your resume while you're there, while the company is paying you to do it, and do those things. I think you'll be all right. Next question. How do I make my parents understand that class averages being low isn't because STEM students are stupid? This is on our engineering students. I've tagged this as a rant, but it's more of an open discussion. I love my parents, and this is a legitimate question to make them understand my perspective. Since they didn't have anything higher than a high school diploma, they don't have the references to understand that no, it's not because the class's averages can be low that the students are not good enough and will make bad engineers. Whenever I say, especially since I'm in my first year and taking the intro courses, oh, this math class had a 45% average, but it's not abnormal for a tough class, they understand it as more the students being the problem, and that the schools will graduate subpar engineers that won't be good enough. Which makes sense from an outside perspective. If the grades are low, then we'll be having bad professionals, whatever the field. Basically, the problem is that the student, since according to their reference, and my past grades, good grades means 75 and above, and a passable 60 to 70, but 50 and lower is very bad. I tried to argue that the material we learn is very dense and complex, with a big time management issue, and also mentioned that a lot of learning comes after graduation, but my dad didn't seem very convinced. Any other convincing argument that will make them understand this reality better? Sorry, because I'm kind of translating these questions as I'm reading through, because I'm trying to turn things into sentences while I'm reading them. I'd say, first of all, why do you feel the need to explain this to your parents? I'm guessing that if a 45-degree average is good, that means that your professor is probably curving the exams, and then so the 45 is not what shows up on your transcript. Are your parents asking for all your grades? I mean, they don't. It's because they're paying for your college. I can understand the pressure to talk to your parents about your grades because maybe they're paying for your school, but if they don't understand, then maybe they don't need to know. You can say, hey, how'd you do in that exam? Oh, I was above average, or I was below average, So I think that my grade will end up here. I don't think you're going to ever be able to really convince them because, as you said, they don't have the context. You've already explained it to them. So if they don't get it, given the context, then they just don't get it. I guess I could say some nonsense about, engineers learn stuff on the job, but if they don't get it, they don't get it. If they don't get it, they don't get it. And I just really wouldn't. I talked to my parents about grades a little bit, but I didn't get down with them in the weeds about that kind of stuff. They didn't really know about what my grades were going to be that semester, unless I wanted to tell them about a particular exam, which sounds like you did. But for the most part, they didn't know until after the semester was over. Because, there's a lot of variability in grades. There's a lot of variability. One of these people commented, a lot of times parents can feel insecure when we see our kids surpassing us, and that it's a weird dynamic because we, as parents, we want to give our kids a better life than what we had, but then when we succeed at that, it feels very unfair. And we try to not let that show, but sometimes it leaks out in weird ways. So maybe that's a little bit of a parent insecurity thing. I don't think so. But, you know, the best advice I saw on here was that just stop talking to your parents about grades that they don't understand. And if they really don't understand, this person says, hand them your textbook. So, and maybe that'll help. So, yeah. So, I have 2 more questions here, and then we'll close out. Next question is how important are good grades when looking for a job after graduation? I'm taking summer courses of my first year, but my marks don't look good, somewhere around 75%. There's too much pressure on me to get good grades from my parents, but I don't think I can go to the average of 90 by the end of 4th year, even if I put in everything I've got. So I'm considering changing my major. What do you all suggest? Gosh, I can't talk today. Edit. I'm taking 2 summer courses and recently started working in a factory. Good grades are important for looking for a job after graduation. Are they the deciding factor? No. Are they the only... May they limit the number of companies that consider you? Possibly. Will good grades only help? Yes. 90% average, I mean... That's pretty... that's a 4.0. That's pretty challenging. To have a 90 out of 100 average here in the U.S. But would I consider changing my major because I couldn't get a 90% average? No. I think it's unrealistic. There's going to be... I mean, I know people that did get really close to that, but I think it's an unrealistic expectation and not a good expectation to consider whenever, like, to have that would make me leave the engineering major. Somewhere around 75%, you know, I'd say go for A's and B's is what you want, and every once in a while if a C comes through or a D comes through, then you just keep on going and you graduate. You said you're working in a factory. You know, if I'm an employer, I'm pretty impressed by that you were working in a factory while you were going to school. And then the last thing, gosh, I am so out of it today. I'm going to get through this and close out and save you guys any more torture from listening to this. You say there's too much pressure on me to get good grades from my parents. You know, at some point, there has to be some motivation that comes from inside. Good grades are important. A's and B's, occasionally the C, it's okay. But you should have that internal motivation to want to make good grades, because good grades will make your life easier. The better your grades are, I mean, yeah, you can get a good job with bad grades, but better grades always help. So, and that motivation needs to come from you, not your parents. If the only reason why you want to get good grades is because your parents, then you need to grow up a little bit and realize that you need to motivate yourself, because your parents aren't always going to be there to be the ones to help motivate you. But yeah, good grades are important. Are they the only deciding factor? No. Will good grades, better grades, help you out in the long run? Likely so. They can't hurt. And keep on being a person with good work ethic, and the fact that you're already working while going to school. That's pretty cool. So I wish you the best of luck. Focus on good grades, but a 90, not being able to get 90s and everything out of 100 is not a valid reason to drop engineering. That is not that big of a deal. Last question. Is electrical engineering social enough? Hey everyone, I'm a future STEM student, more specifically electrical engineering, and I love math, science, problem solving, and having to be creative, as well as always working on new things. Thus, I'm sure I'll like electrical engineering. However, there's another aspect of a job that I highly value, and that's teamwork and working with others, or for my work to have influence or interact with others. So my question is, how would you describe the social aspect of the field? So engineering is extremely social. You're working on teams of engineers to solve problems. So you're the electrical engineer, you'll likely be working with a team of electrical engineers, and you'll be working with a team of mechanical engineers and a team of civil engineers. If you really want to be really social, maybe look at roles like project management. So you're running the projects, you're interfacing even more with all the other departments. But yeah, engineering is a super social field. I don't understand why people think that all engineers are secluded people that just want to sit in their cubicle and code and be by themselves. Some engineers are less social than others, and maybe some people actually do want to sit in a box and just code. But electrical engineering is very social, and what I'll say is that being a social person can only help you, in my opinion. As long as you have good reads of social cues and you're not overbearing, being a social person is helpful as an engineer. And I would describe the social aspect of the field being you need to be an effective communicator to be an effective contributor. So people that are working on their social and communication skills will be able to communicate themselves better to others and be more valuable to the team because they're the ones that are able to effectively communicate solutions. So I would say that being social and the social aspect of the field are very important. It's very prevalent. The field is very social, and I don't think you should be worried about going into engineering if you're a social person. In fact, I would be pretty excited. I'm what I'd call a social butterfly, and I definitely get enough social interaction out of working as an engineer, and I know you will too. So, anyways, that's the podcast. I think it's because it's 83 degrees in here. I am overheated. There's stinky cat smell in here, and there's noise coming in from the other room. So that was one heck of a podcast, I'll tell you. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to listen to it and see whether or not I need to just axe it and record it again. I'm kind of all over the place today, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys in the next one, probably in the next couple weeks. I'll try to get one more in before my wedding. I'm going to a wedding this weekend. Congratulations, Emma and John. Can't wait to celebrate you guys. Yes, that Emma that visited the podcast earlier is getting married. Emma from episode, I think, 3 or 4 or 5. Yeah, she's getting married, and I'm very excited for her. So kudos to the future Tuckers. Very excited to celebrate you guys. Again, if you like the podcast, give it 5 stars, share it with your friends, comment on YouTube, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Now I'm not complaining, my thoughts get complicated, I cannot explain in layman's. Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payments. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.